Okay, welcome, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to this week's edition of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, feminist, and literary perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is...
your ever-hateful boyfriend, Brian.
Ever-hateful boyfriend, indeed. And so this week we're going to be talking about the episode Passion from Season 2, which is a barn burner, to say the least.
What does that mean? I don't know that. Yeah.
Just like a riotous, significant, technically a barn burner is kind of more of a party, but this is a narrative party, and it's a very significant episode, obviously, in terms of the season, in terms of Buffy's character arc, in terms of the show in general. So in our traditional, what's the word I'm looking for here? When we do important episodes, we don't waste time talking shit at the start. So we're just going to go straight into talking about it. So this is, in a one-word capsule elevator pitch summary, this is the one where Angel kills Jenny Calendar.
It sure fucking is. So this is Season 2, Episode 17. It was first released first broadcast on the 24th of February 1998. That's significant because apparently consistently the 17th or the 16th episode of each season is pretty significant in terms of this significance for the arc of the season, and then also in terms of it being a really strong episode usually. So a couple of the other ones that happen are The Body and which ones? The episode in Season 6 that I can never remember the name of, where Buffy is in the insane asylum.
Sure, I always want to say Slayer Interrupted, but that's not what it's called.
It's not what it's called at all. It's like, who am I think. Anyway, the reason for that is that February in America is sweeps month. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's why they try to get the owl watchers up for that month.
I don't know if I really understand what a sweep is. It's always associated with big checks in my brain.
Yeah,
and some Americanism about.
Well, no, this is basically, it's the month in which they use to specifically sell to advertisers.
Sure.
Here's how much money we made this month. Give us money back, please. Or how many viewers we have this month, please advertise on our products.
Wasn't there something about in The Simpsons where they got junk mail and Bark signing up for those sweeps in like a mail-in thing? That could be a different thing. It's all very opaque to me. But I do not know what a sweep is.
Yeah.
It's like the Nielsen ratings as well. That's a television thing that's really... like they send out little books to a very select group of random people and get them to fill out handwritten feedback on TV, and that's how they decide if people like TV or not, basically. It's just really archaic. Yeah.
So it was written by Ty King, who also wrote Some Assembly Required, and directed by Michael E. Gershman, who actually died last March, which is quite sad. So March 2018. He was the director of photography for most of Buffy. So that means he's my hero, because the photography in Buffy is consistently incredible. But this is the first episode he directed, and there's a couple more coming up. And he actually won the Emmy for Hush for outstanding cinematography, which is great. Well done him. But
quite surprised it's not directed by a more regular play or written by a more regular player.
So okay, there are rumors flying around online about this episode in terms of who wrote it, because Ty King, there's nothing about him online. Very little information about him. He does not seem to have done a great job with this. He didn't do a great job with some assembly required. So it's widely perceived as being an episode actually secretly written by Joss Whedon, but this guy took first pass and just Joss completely rewrote it, because it smacks of Joss Whedon.
Absolutely,
the writing,
I would say everything about it.
The poetry, the structure, the Xanderisms in it are quite Joss Whedon-y.
Everyone uses their own voice in it.
They do, and when he says, faster pussycat kill and stuff like that, that's a very Joss reference. It's widely perceived as not being this guy who has actually written it, and it was in fact Joss Whedon to some degree, or to a much larger degree than is indicated.
I think there's quite a lot of both voluntary and involuntary politics around writing episodes, in terms of when you can credit something as being written by a person and when it's appropriate to do so and all that. So obviously we've nothing to say for certain, but this feels like part of the Whedon-esque canon, very much so. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of all I have information-wise about the writers and directors. So let's go into our Buffy Ann summary. Partly forgiven by Buffy and Giles, Jenny reconstructs her ancestor's curse. Warned by Drusilla, Angelus kills her before she can cast it, destroying her computer. He leaves her corpse in Giles' bed. Giles attacks him, setting fire to the factory, and Buffy has to rescue Giles. So yeah, there you go.
I don't think one of the most important things that people take away from this episode, if you've limited space to talk about it, is Angel breaks her computer. Do you know that that's not the thing?
Yeah. I mean, like, if I had like very little time to talk about this episode, I'd probably leave a little bit of a note about a floppy disk, maybe.
Yeah, for sure.
Much more relevant.
I think actually, yeah, specifically because there's 4 in that, and we'll come to that scene where when he kind of destroys the curse. There's 4 active elements. There's the printout, the computer, the orb of Tesla, and the floppy disk. And the computer is one of the least important ones there. In your memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in broad strokes, like that's vaguely on the money, but I think it kind of sells like short emotionally. So we basically have an episode told or framed entirely from Angel's perspective, because he is stalking Buffy and watching her extensively and talking a lot about passion and what does passion mean. And
one of the first, is it the first voiced over episode of the show? I think it might be.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's actually done quite well. I mean, like, because voiceover often absolutely fucking ruins a thing, a la Blade Runner.
Yeah, so traditionally in these kind of, particularly in genre pieces, people include voiceovers when they feel the audience won't be able to understand what's happening and they just want to lay it out. But I think this is very much built into the structure and the theme of what's happening.
Most of what like Angel says in this episode in his voiceover is essentially a poem. It's
very lyrical, and it's very kind of Byron-esque. And
Byron-esque is a very good shout there. Yeah. But I mean, like, I say that having never really read much of Byron's poetry, but it's certainly Byron-esque in its style.
It's not as good as what Mary Shelley wrote.
True, yeah.
But yeah, so basically in broader strokes, Angel's ramping up his kind of stalking of Buffy, and we have thematically just the subtext is rapidly becoming text, in that his abusive boyfriend or ex or unstable ex traits are now textually, that's the role he is role playing with Joyce and with with the other people in her life. There's a lot more of him kind of invading her privacy, appearing in her bedroom, leaving notes for her sketches, etc.
Yeah, the whole movement of this whole episode is that at the beginning of the episode he is stalking them outside of the bronze, and he which is actually really fascinating to see. I'd like to talk about that later.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he leaves a drawing of Buffy in her bedroom. He then leaves, they kind of all become aware then that he is stalking her, and he's, as he was when he had his soul, the only thing he thinks about now is Buffy, as Willow says. So he then goes ahead and like strings Willow's fish together on a hook, which is horrifying. He leaves a drawing of Buffy of Joyce, and he then does the whole, Jenny Calendar, So... Yeah. Here, actually, do you mind if I quickly? So, in the last episode, I said a couple of things that were incorrect, and they were highlighted. They were highlighted by me when I listened back to it, because. But then also Kieran tweeted at us as well. So I said that Ben Stiller was in Gone Girl, which is hilarious.
Okay,
it was fucking Ben Affleck, of course. And the other thing I said, these are both David Fincher related corrections, and it's because his people have been in touch, and they said if I don't correct this, they're going to sue us. Yeah. So the other thing is that David Fincher's most female-led movie is, of course, Panic Room, which is one of the ones that we forget quite often, but it's actually quite good. I really like Panic Room. Yeah,
it was better than I thought it was going to be when I went into it. And
Jared Leto's in it with white person blonde dreads.
Yeah. Yeah, Kristen Stewart's in that as well, right?
Kristen Stewart is in it as a very young actress. Kristen Stewart, when she was... Kirsten?
Well, why is it we specifically... So it's her...
Kirsten Bell.
And Christine Sutherland. And that name trips us up extensively.
Yeah. So Kristen Stewart was an incredible actor. I think she's a great actress generally. But she was really good in this movie called Speak in 2003, I think. Sure. Which was a movie about her having been raped, essentially. And her basically going completely mute for a year in school and no one noticing. And it's a really, really powerful. I think it was only released on TV. It was made for TV, I think, but it was incredibly good. And what's his name is in it? I think, if I remember correctly, that really good actor, Steve something, who was in...
Buscemi, Coogan.
No. He was in Driving in Cars with Boys. He's one of those ones that you love.
Carell.
No,
I haven't seen the thing you're talking about.
He was in that really good movie, or a really weird movie, like Rising Dawn or something, with Christian Bale, or who
this is staying on topic, by the way.
Staying on topic, but also I'm giving up on that guy's name. Oh, what is it? Anyway, but for years. At one point, my dad was watching Empire of the Sun and was like, "Oh look, it's Christian Ballet," and I was like, "Dad, don't be stupid. It's Christian Bale." And he was like, "Oh, Brian, sure is egg on your face. His name is Christian Ballet." And I was like, "No, it's not." I looked it up online, and it absolutely is Christian Bale, of course. But like, this is a thing that he's consistently maintained as him totally taking the piss, and will never admit that it's like him taking the piss. He only referred to him as Christian Ballet.
The one that I was always proud of years before I think he got like a lot of recognition is the main actor in 12 Years a Slave, Chiwetel Ejiofor, who was in Serenity, which is the sequel to the Firefly, actually, Joss Whedon connection. But I just felt really uncomfortable that I couldn't pronounce his name because it wasn't a name I was familiar with. So I specifically went off and like listened to pronunciations and got comfortable with it, which is no pat on my back, but I was like, you are clearly patting your back
for being able to pronounce a person's name that has like African connotations. Well done, Joe.
That's not what that. Don't make me the bad guy.
So I'm talking with Steve Zahn.
Steve Zahn.
You know Steve Zahn?
Yes. Yeah. You're the big bag of this podcast. Let's be realistic.
Oh, it's so true.
So what I want to do before we get into it, because we will get off topic, or not off topic, but we'll get into the weeds. There's a couple of things we have to outline that happen in this episode for context. So
do it.
One of the main things is obviously now that Angel's ramping up this harassment, they're looking to disinvite him magically because the vampires obviously can't get into the house without an invitation. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of them hiding in each other's homes. Jenny Calendar is trying to reconcile with Buffy and Giles, and does this by finding a ritual and using a computer program, which I have questions about, to translate the ritual to restore his soul, the ancient ritual that the Kalgardash people used to ensoul him originally. And he finds out about this because Drew has a very convenient vision and destroys the ritual, kills her, and leaves her, as we said, Jenny Calendar for Giles to find. Giles goes full ripper, tries to burn down the set,
the factory,
and succeeds. Succeeds. That's
the death of the factory set.
Which I never really kind of like,
they go back there in season 3 at one point, but yeah,
sure. And in doing so, Joyce kind of gets a bit more into Buffy's world, finds out about Angel, finds out that Buffy and Angel have had sex, and they have to have kind of all those moments. So yeah, there's like quite a lot actually happens in this episode, other than just the really obvious stuff. It's really dense, but just to set the context for that. But let's start with the first scene. Let's start with Angel watching the four of them, Corgi, Willow, and specifically Buffy and Xander dancing very close in the bronze, and him just waxing lyrical about them.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, it's really a fascinating scene because it's such a rare glimpse into the Scoobies having a nice fun night and having nothing go wrong. So, all they do is they go out for a dance and a bop and they enjoy themselves. Yeah.
Which is cover church. That's what the sign said.
Oh, yeah, true. And they really enjoy themselves, by all accounts. They just seem young and youthful, and Xander and Cordelia are being weirdly affectionate towards each other, which is nice.
Yeah, they're linking arms and all that. It's just normal.
Not sure why Oz isn't there, to be honest, but whatever.
Actor reasons, most likely. Yeah.
Sure. But while they're leaving, they kind of brush off while they're walking out of the bronze. They see a couple basically making out.
Mm.
And once they've walked past, the girl falls to the ground dead because it's Angel and a woman he's
trained.
Yeah. So I mean, in that moment, I mean, I personally would see another very clear sex and death kind of connection. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I read an interesting article that was by Diane de Kelb Rittenhouse, which is called Sex and the Single Vampire, because of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about the kind of Byronic, Dracula-esque kind of approach that they can take in this sometimes to sex. But this is what she says about it. In Passions, we are presented with an extremely provocative image that may be said to sum up the vampire Lothario. Angelus, watching Buffy from the shadows, delivers the following narration over scenes of her dancing the bronze. Passion, it lies in all of us, sleeping, waiting, and though unwanted, unbidden, it will stir, open its jaws and howl. Leaving the bronze, Buffy and her friends pass a couple apparently locked in a passionate kiss. Only after the young people walk on does Angelus drop the drained body of his partner, revealing the embrace for what it was, the counterfeit of love, a sensual, ecstatic remembering of death. This scene epitomizes the romance of the vampire and the appeal of the vampire Lothario, the eroticization of death and possibility of eternity spent in a sensual abandon. So yeah, it was just like, I was like, yeah, no, it absolutely is. It's a really beautiful little like encapsulation of...
Well articulated.
It's really well articulated. Yeah. I was like, oh, I enjoyed just reading it.
And I think it ties in well, because, we talked about before, but like the vampire myth is all about, le petit mort, the little death, the boundary between kind of the interface between sensuality and violence and blood loss and fluids and all that kind of stuff is like very much tied up. And on Buffy, it can sometimes be not diminished, but they kind of do this modern take on the vampire, where vampires are just guys doing things, but like Angel really brings that forward. And I think you see particularly in how he manipulates the girls, specifically in this episode, by drawing the sketches of them, which is the first time we see his sketching ability. Like that's a very romantic thing traditionally. I think for modern audiences, it's very evocative of things like Titanic, but it's a very old-fashioned way of approaching it. And one thing I will mention, just as an aside, what I really like is played to very like creepy effect as he like draws these photorealistic sketches and leaves them on their pillow. And in Angel, the show, as things go on, it's just played more and more for comedic effect, because they'll mention something and he'll be like, oh yeah, look, something like this, it was like this, wasn't it? And he'll turn around and it'll be an incredibly elaborate and detailed sketch that he's done in like 5 minutes. Which I just always quite funny, and people always make jokes in Angel that I forget the fact that you can just draw really well.
Yeah, here you can. They're deeply sensual portraits. It's definitely they're kind of, they feel like pillow talk, spacey kind of things. And there's definitely an interesting note there about why is Angel so creative. But one of the things I read online, written by Mark Field actually, was that he reckons that, I think it was Mark Field, I might be wrong there, but that at one point Angel says that without passion we are dead, or something like that in his voiceover. And he says, well, yes, Angel doesn't experience any passion and he is like, dead. I was kind of thinking, no, I mean, Angel is the primary source of passion in this episode. He's the thing that, because he's entirely driven by passion, like he only thinks of Buffy, and he, like, in this instance, his passion is not driven by love, it's driven by a desire to destroy her. And he tries to do so, like, quite effectively. So in my reading of the episode title, like, there's the obvious, there's a three-pronged approach. There's Buffy's passion and how that's like brought this into the world, this awfulness, and then like having to deal with that with Joyce, and talking about Buffy having taken that decision onto herself and how inappropriate it was, or Joyce kind of scolds her for it, and Buffy's scolding herself for lack of judgment, and Buffy's scolding herself for a second reason, obviously. Giles's passion at the end of the episode, it's like, at the beginning of the episode he's saying, you can't let your
he very specifically says that you can't allow him to provoke you can't let your passions rule you need to rise above it, because he's trying to goad you into a mishap, and obviously that's exactly what he
says. You can't be a slave to your passion, basically. And that's, of course, what he does at the end of the episode. He is allowed to his passion drives him insane, and he tries to take on 3 vampires by himself. So and then obviously Angel's passion for Buffy and how he wants to use that to destroy her.
So I just briefly just allude to what you said there, that it's an interesting note about the vampires in terms of they are very vivacious and vibrant and passionate creatures, these specific ones, because we get very few named or main stage vampires who are violent or without emotion. Because if you look at Liam before he was Angelus, a very vibrant and passionate person, obviously that creativity and that lust for life comes through an Angel, and Spike when he was William, a very sensitive young boy, and a poet, exactly. And Drew was obviously very like saintly, chaste, religious, very fragile person. So all 3 of them are examples of a sensitivity that is twisted rather than a brutality in some ways.
And it's certainly like it's that kind of sensitivity and that passion, and in this instance that like drives them to be such effective killing machines. It maybe through like empathizing with those emotions, being able to use those to really torture people, or potentially it's just that I'm not sure what I'm trying to say there, never mind. So in this episode, obviously, we say goodbye to Jenny Calendar, which is a real shame, because I really like Jenny Calendar. I think she's a great character.
Yeah.
Did you read this about Oz, though?
Yeah.
So apparently, originally, this episode was supposed to be saying goodbye to Oz. He was supposed to be the character who was going to get killed, but the character of Oz was turning out to be reasonably popular, so instead they killed Jenny Calendar, which is such a shame.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because you need to have for this to work and for this to be worthwhile, and this is the first example of something that became quite, a Whedon-esque trope, which is characters,
experiencing real happiness,
being taken just when things are starting to work out a bit, or also, he said about this episode, this was communication to the actors and the audience that no one is safe, death is real, and the Angel isn't just a bit grumpy or a little bit evil. He's like incredibly soulless and horrible. But you have to use a character for whom you care enough about.
Yeah.
But you also, as he said with Oz, is like there's that balancing act of like, do you want to eliminate someone who, like, I don't think Spike ever would have died on the show in some ways, because once he got to this point of popularity, I know that was originally the plan for Spike, but like the reason why they defang him is because he is so likable.
Yeah.
So it's a weird balancing act, and you have to get it right, because if they just killed Jonathan or something, I'd be like, oh, sorry.
Speaking of Jonathan, Jonathan appears in this episode with a nurse student, and I checked. Sorry, no, I didn't check. One of the things I read was that this is one of the 2 times in total in Buffy where students who are not one of the Scoobies go to check out a book from the library, and the other one is Owen. And
they specifically, when Owen are fucking, like, what was it? I was going to say Emily Blunt, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Emily Blunt.
What am I trying to say? It's not Jane Austen, is it?
Oh no, it's Emily
Dickinson,
yeah.
Not Emily Blunt. But yeah, they, like, specifically when Jonathan and this other student come in looking for books on Stalin, Xander's like, what are you doing here? Don't you knock and get out and all that kind of stuff, so like it's very it's a fun moment.
It is. But so there's the last episode with Jenny Calendar, so we have to kind of look at what her character represents in total. So I thought, like, great character, well portrayed. The actress did a great job, and it means that I definitely should have looked up her name before sitting into this episode so that I could remember it, but I didn't, so fuck it. But I'm going to bring out one of my essays again, because actually read a really, really insightful interpretation of Jenny Calendar as a character. So first of all, she kind of represents one of the many sought after maternal figures in this show. So Buffy kind of doesn't really trend towards us all that much, though she does a little bit with Maggie, Professor Maggie, whatever her name is, in season 4. She definitely sees her as an alternative mother figure.
Yeah.
Go on, what's her name?
I don't have it yet, but you continue to cover while I look it up.
Of course, yeah. So, and then in season 3, Faith kind of trends towards looking for new female maternal role models. So that the fake Watcher who comes along is kind of replacing both her presumably absent mother and her previous Watcher who was killed. And then she also reads Jenny Calendar, this essayist whose name is J.P. Williams. So this writer reads Jenny Calendar as being a specific maternal figure for Willow. And this essay is called Choosing Your Own Mother. And so, like, with that, you kind of get a couple of things. One is that she teaches Willow like a way into techno-paganism. So obviously her leaving behind her kind of like mantle to Willow as being the person who will do the ritual. Yeah. It leads Willow into both, like, further into like her technological exploration, and into it becomes her first magic act. Yeah. At the end of season 2. Sorry. So yeah. So I'm like, Jenny Calendar as potential maternal figure. Interesting there. But, okay, and I'm not sure, there's so much here. I kind of want to, can I read out a big chunk of text?
Yeah, go for it. We don't do it very often.
Okay, cool. I'll cut this out if it's really bad. So, J.P. Williams. Yet there is a limit to Jenny's influence, and that limit suggests why it is ultimately difficult to label Buffy a feminist text. Jenny herself, after all, is a victim of the patriarchy she criticized. Trained to think in terms of the vengeance her tribe wants to enact on Angel, she is unable to transcend her early conditioning. As she explains to Giles shortly before her death, I was raised by the people that Angel hurt the most. My duty to them was the first thing I was ever taught. Jenny, the actively sexual woman who could debate Giles as an equal, is reduced to the position of obedient child in her dealings by a scene with her uncle in Innocence. Her dealings with her uncle. Her perilous position relative to her tribe is demonstrated by a scene with her uncle in Innocence. As he finally explains the implications of the curse to Jenny, she is seated. The camera is positioned at a high angle, making Jenny appear small and perilous relative to her uncle. So great stuff there. Although Jenny inspires Willow, her death leaves no strong older woman for the younger characters to consult, and demonstrates the limitations of Buffy's feminist vision. Not even Jenny, a woman who speaks against patriarchy and envisions a new society that marries magic and technology, can escape the influence of the patriarchal order. Ultimately, she cannot defy her own fathers and survives without their aid. One of the images frequently highlighted in Buffy's opening credits is the terrifying moment Angelus casually snaps Jenny's neck. The ultimate woman in jeopardy scene, it signals the limit of Buffy's vision. Buffy may run down the hall of Sunnydale High confidently. For the mature woman, however, that path is a maze with death at its centre. Jenny, the adult woman, best equipped to survive Buffy's world, cannot triumph. The chosen one and her friends, therefore, will have to invent their own ideal of womanhood with few positive models to guide them. Whether Buffy will provide an alternative model of womanhood is perhaps the series' most intriguing cliffhanger. So yeah, tons of shit there. And that is, like, I promise, the longest quote I'll ever read on this podcast, because that was mad.
It was a very, very important episode, very important scene, though. What I will say is, like, definitely some interesting stuff to unpack there, and I don't think that Buffy is, as a show, is blemishless as a feminist text. I don't know if I agree with it.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, I think, Robbie Lamour does a really good job in her portrayal of Jenny in terms of showing a fully realised woman. And I think if she was, I definitely agree that she is a great representation of a modern, sexually technically aware person who kind of like tries to transcend and queer and synthesize
and ushering
things.
In a new era of approach to old things.
Sure, but I think there are so many women in the show that portray so many different ways of being a woman that I think what Buffy does very well is frees hopefully any one woman of the responsibility of representing women.
I think so too,
as a whole, and I think
that's kind of the point of the season finale. That's certainly a very legitimate reading of Buffy distributing the power, is that she no longer needs to be totemic of womanhood.
Yeah, and I think it's very important whenever you're talking about representing any minority group or any underrepresented sector of society, is the burden that individuals in that feel in being the paragon. And I think the reality is that this text is not a flight of fancy. This episode is very much about that. Yeah, you can absolutely be an incredibly strong role model, an incredibly strong woman, and terrible things will still happen to you and you still won't succeed, but eventually others will. And just that there's no, like, this episode is not about there being, in my view, a replicable, easy answer or consistent answer to life. It's very much about sometimes things just happen, and there's no great way to it's grief rather than.
And you don't see Jenny Callender's episode as being fridged, of course. Fridging being, I think we've explained it before, but fridging being the tendency in texts to kill women to further men's emotional journeys. No,
I don't. I think it requires some consideration. It's actually interesting because someone who I was speaking to recently about Buffy was on another note was asking whether I feel as a bisexual man that Willow's character arc is bi erasure, because she starts off in relationship with Oz and moves on and later identifies it as gay. And I think there is often a danger of false positives and overly tagging things, which comes from a desire to like not miss out and not fail to call out these issues. But you have to have a certain nuance about it. Willow's journey, I think, on the surface has many of the hallmarks of bi erasure in other shows, but I think in its nuance, I don't feel it's there. I don't feel that's the intent. I don't feel that's it's the outcome. And similarly, if you were to reduce and make a Buffy Ann summary of what happens to Jenny and say Jenny, who was a powerful woman, was killed to further Giles' emotional arc, etc. Yes, that's what fridging would be, but that's not why it happens.
Yeah, it happens is like to show the like unfair cruelty that can be wrought into a situation. It's not that she's reduced to a death scene. It's that she shows the kind of the unbridled chaos that can follow from the cruelty that Angel is about to induce.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things where you know it when you see it, and I think I didn't watch that episode and think the point of this was Jenny would die so Giles could have his manly grief moment, which is often why women die in these kind of things. I feel like what happened was Jenny died because that was what happened in quote unquote reality, and Giles had a natural reaction to that, but no one sat down to make that happen. I think that's the key difference.
I gotcha.
And I think the fact like what Jenny contributes to the story and contributes to the both interior and exterior to the narrative, like transcends her death. We remember her death, but she's not defined by it.
Sure.
And she has a full interior life, and she has relationships with other people, and she goes on she doesn't have her relationship with Giles resolved, but she does have some things resolved. Like it's fully realized. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. So like that kind of leads us quite nicely because I want to talk about the chase scene because I thought it was actually just really, really like vigorous and really beautifully shot. I wouldn't be surprised at all that if this scene, I actually think this episode is incredibly well shot. Just generally, I think the apartment scene is beautiful. The scene of them finding out about her over the phone is really, really stunning. And I'd say that it was a situation where Michael E. Gershwin was specifically, like, you know, pulling out all the stops for his directorial debut. Like, I think he was really bringing his director of photography eye to the directing role. Yeah. Because I mean the chase scene is stunning. It's like
something Angel chases. Actually, for a second, completely forgotten her name. It was like Gloria.
Wow.
Chases Jenny through Sunnydale High, and as you said, we see both him and her and Sunnydale High, things which at one point were very safe spaces and comfortable spaces, turned into like a monster hunting her through the school.
Incredibly labyrinthian. Yeah, it's very labyrinthy because, like, you know, it just feels like it's constantly winding tunnels and all pointing towards a center and like trying to capture a monster, but even like just the use of light in it, it's constantly like flashing on and off like this, like running through columns, and, you know, light leaving the shot for a couple of seconds and then come back, and it felt incredibly alarming, and it was one of the most perilous scenes in Buffy, I think, just full stop. It feels
my heart was pounding, like I because I'm obviously I'm zoned in, jacked in while I'm watching it. I'm like, you feel that fear, like it has, and what I think is one of the really monstrous and really scary things about it, and which I don't know, I wonder whether it was intentional or not, but when he snaps her neck, you can see a car driving by outside in the street.
I didn't notice that.
And you don't see a lot of cars just driving around, particularly if that's not the scene.
Yeah.
So that really gave me a sense of like, people are just there and no one can help her. Yeah.
That scene where he snaps her neck, apparently he doesn't feed in her specifically because because they didn't want to have any suggestion there at all that she might come back.
Yeah.
And you're reading.
That's specifically the reason. Because a lot of what they do with Angel, when he's Angelus, is to twist his lovable angel self and make it kind of, violent. But they didn't have Dave Boreanaz in his regular makeup. They had him in his vamp makeup while he kills Jenny, because they didn't want the audience to genuinely hate the character, because he obviously has a redemptive arc coming.
Yeah. If they thought that they
didn't want to associate his face.
Yeah, if they associated babyface Angel with snapping the neck of Jenny Calendar, that would be like, just, you wouldn't be able to root for him ever again. Yeah.
Which is it's an interesting and deft choice, I think. But like them framed in front of that window, the moonlight outside, him killing her, and even her looking up from her computer and him just sitting in the back of the room.
That shot was stunning. Yeah. Just so it's a shot where basically she's sitting in her room, in her classroom, getting her notes ready because she's about to tell Giles about it. And she prints out her documents, and very naturally she's printing it out. She focuses on the printer, and her eyes wander up slightly, and it's a really nice shot because it's the movement of the camera very specifically replicates the eye movement, and it focuses on the back of the room, and he's sitting there very casually. But it's a really beautiful shot. It's a difficult focus pull, and it's very difficult to show naturally, and it really works. Oh, did you notice, Kay? I actually specifically think that the highlighting of the floppy disk in that scene, where there's like a very prolonged shot of her like pushing the thing to get it to come out, and it being like a bright yellow, it's literally highlighted. The floppy disk, which is so funny.
I have just such strong memories of when I watched Buffy when I was younger, and not having obviously the detailed memory of it that I have now, but that floppy disk, and knowing it was down the side of that table and just be like, just get the fucking floppy disk. It really gives you that frustration,
Oh yeah, it's a great little thing.
And I love when you can shortcut issues with this kind of thing, right? And something which people have dwelled on since this episode aired, as such like a well flogged horse that people keep bringing out, is she asks how did he get in there, and he says, the sign in front of the school says in Latin, enter all ye who seek knowledge. And people read it's like, well, that's implying that he needed permission or an invitation to enter the school, but that's contradictory, etc. And like, I read something when I was looking up on this episode, which just says she was just asking how he got in the room without her noticing, and he said that to just fuck with her. Basically, it's just him making a joke.
But even if it's goof, maybe it's just a goof.
Well, see, the problem is people, when they, in many cases, when people analyze TV shows or films, they never incorporate the idea that the person speaking could be either lying or wrong.
It's so true, yeah.
You know, they always take it as authorial voice, you know.
Or even just that the writers just didn't think of that for a second, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. But then it doesn't hold together, Brian. Then it's all ruined.
Yeah, true.
Just before we move on from the neck snapping, I would just mention, as resident curse with the comics knowledge, this is very specifically replicated in the comics. At one point, Angel kills Giles for complicated comics reasons.
Oh, that's so not interesting.
Sorry.
Anyway, yeah, very good.
But he snaps his neck, and he snaps it in his regular face, and it becomes a whole thing. And there's actually quite a poignant bit in the comics where at one point Giles has to bind a memory demon, you know, which is like not that unusual thing to happen in Buffy. But
typical, yeah. Sure.
To do that, he volunteers the memory of the first time that the first date he had with Jenny, and like burns that up to like.
In fairness, it was going to monster trucks, right?
Yeah, it was monster trucks, which is quite nice.
So yeah, that scene of him snapping her neck, like I remember that when I was younger. I will never forget that scene. Incredible, so fucking powerful, so disturbing.
The gasp heard around the world, yeah.
The crack heard around the world. Yeah. Snap. Okay, so the apartment scene. For my money's worth, maybe the top 10 scenes in Buffy.
Yeah. Giles' apartment we're talking about specifically.
Full on. Yes. Yeah. So Giles rides back to his apartment. He finds a rose outside of outside of the door, and he presumes that Jenny has left it there.
Because they made plans to meet in his apartment.
Exactly. So he comes in, and there's La Boheme is playing on his vinyl player. There are tea lights lit everywhere, tea candles lit everywhere, and he finds a note saying upstairs. He goes upstairs and he finds her lifeless body as the song crescendos.
Yeah,
it's disturbing in every possible way.
And we've gotten this far without specifically mentioning this, but to this day, if you or I come back to our apartment and the door is left open because one of us forgotten to lock it or something, I certainly always open the door and shout out, "Have you been Jenny Calendar?" just to make sure there's no actual intruder.
Yeah. And a couple of years ago, I remember I went for a period of about 5 times in the space of 1 month, leaving very loud opera music playing whenever I'd leave the house, and you were going to be coming back so that you could come home and be like, so I don't listen to opera music generally.
Please call the police. Help me.
But I read a really Mark Field had an extensive interpretation of this scene, and specifically broke down line by line with the opera what is being sung in each separate scene. So the original script for this scene doesn't include what music should be used. It's just like, romantic music. Yeah. But it's hard not to read into it. La Boheme is one of the most enduring operas of all time.
You don't pick that out of nowhere.
Exactly, and it would be specifically known in this context as being the source text for Rent, on which Rent is based on La Boheme. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure. Do you have any interpretation of La Boheme here that you can lens to the?
I actually be interested in hearing from you about kind of what was corresponding to the scene, which section it was.
Sure. So it's essentially the Roger character and Mimi. I can't remember who the Roger character is. Yeah. What is his name in La Boheme? But they are proclaiming their love for each other for the first time. One of the most interesting parts that I read, as Giles drops the champagne, the line being sung is "Love, you rule alone," which is quite topical for the episode. So it's about passion and love and romance and stuff. But one of the things that Mark Field specifically explored that I found kind of quite intriguing was that it's kind of sad and weird, sad and atypical that Giles would own this record. That he definitely has a background in punk music. No, we know that he was Sid Vicious apparently, but the fact that he would own a romantic opera that has flights of fancy and is about the death of a lover, and it indicates a romantic imagination in Giles that isn't really present in his portrayal of the character. And he also notes that the record itself sounds quite played out.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's been played quite a few times, because you can tell that about records.
Well, it's by far one of the most interesting things with Giles' eventual character arc is, he had his rebellious phase, sure, but he is really portrayed as having been, in his own way, a victim of the same patriarchy that Buffy is part of, that he is very limited by it.
You feel so ashamed singing all the time, so.
Yeah, he's hemmed in, and even Willow makes a joke in this episode about not knowing if Giles knew what sex was because he's a librarian, which is
a great scene.
Which is funny, but it's also very Buffy helps him get outside these boundaries as well as he develops, and unfortunately sometimes it takes really, really difficult blows like this as well. And let's not move off before saying Anthony Searhead in this episode,
stunning,
the range, from the genuine and the defensiveness he has of Buffy, the in some ways naivete of him saying, just don't let your guard down, don't be provoked, him being so genuinely excited when he feels like he's going to get back with Jenny and that's going to work out and that's a positive end. And then for me, definitely the apartment scene really up there, but honorable mention in this episode is when he goes to the factory to try and kill Angel. It's one of my formative Giles moments. There's maybe 10 things that Giles does that I think defines his personality.
Because he does good. He gives Angel a good run for his money.
Well, see, it's actually quite a funny, I think, crescendo, because he brings the crossbow because everyone's convinced the crossbow is how you kill a big bat, and he hits him, he pins him. It's actually a great, it's the only thing that happens in this episode, and obviously Buffy comes along as well, but it's the only thing that undermines Angel to that extent, because he's talking to Spike and Drew and saying, look, I have everything under control, nothing's going to happen. And at that point, Giles throws a Molotov cocktail and burns the place down, bursts in, grabs a burning 2x4 and beats the crap out of Angel.
It's a baseball bat actually, and he dips it in the fire to light it and then starts whacking him with it.
Oh yeah, I thought it was. I almost thought I saw him pick it up off the table, but yeah, he it's brutal, and it has that characteristic, it's not flashy, it's that Ripper just immobilize him, but and he just nails him. Obviously Angel eventually overpowers him, but he Angel does not see that coming.
Yeah.
And I think what really happened there is he's so focused on Buffy, he doesn't realize the vector that he's caused from Giles. He just sees everyone as ancillary to Buffy, and he's very carefully controlling how much he pushes her.
Yeah.
But he doesn't realize that he pushed Giles far, and he also completely underestimates Giles. He doesn't know anything about Giles other than him just being a stuffy watcher.
Sure.
And it's very good. And Buffy comes along and beats the crap out of him as well.
Yeah.
And they burn down the factory, which is a classic Whedon trope of destroying the set. And he just cries outside while Buffy holds him. It's so affecting.
Yeah, she punches him and then she says, you can't do that, you can't leave me alone.
Yeah, because he's this isn't your fight. And but it's a great crescendo, the fact that he's always threatening to go and fight people on Buffy's behalf, and this time he actually did it, and he did a pretty decent job for who he is.
Sure. So when he after he finds Jenny, he says to the police guys, can I make a phone call? And he phones up Buffy. Apparently, for this scene, they actually hooked up those phone lines.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's an actual phone call coming through from Anthony Head.
That's so weird.
It is really weird. And people have the dialogue online. Apparently it was written. So but it was actually kind of boring. But
because sometimes the most upsetting things have to be said in bizarrely banal terms. It's just something happened, Jenny's dead.
Yeah, sure. But smartly, the actual episode takes place from outside. It puts a literal veil over it, because Angel's watching this scene where Buffy finds out about Jenny Callender's death, because that's his money shot. That's what he's looking for, is Buffy, seeing Buffy destroyed like that. And
because he has this little puppy-ish expression of he kind of dodges. He's I want to make sure I get a really good angle on this. He's excited watching it. It's really perverse, and it's obviously all that peeping Tom imagery.
But he watches them find out. And Sarah Michelle Gellar and Alison Hannigan play a blinder in this episode, because they're both quite funny at times. And this scene, they're both just so distraught. Buffy just slides down onto the floor and
sinks into herself.
And it's a really beautiful bit of acting from Sarah Michelle Gellar. And you can only see you can see it through a blind. I think there's a layer of
what do you call those? A net curtain, basically.
Yeah. And it's it creates this really beautiful effect
haze
of distancing us from the protagonist, and then also showing us Angel's perspective and just showing her as being splintered as a character in that moment. And then Alison Hannigan, just her face
goes to pieces,
crumbles. And any time Alison Hannigan weeps, I weep. She is like, she just gives incredible crying because she's horrified.
It's just so authentic. It's just like the two very common ways people grieve, like just Buffy essentially just knowing it to be true and feeling, I think, a lot of guilt as well, like feeling like that it was her job to stop it, and like Willow just being so completely shattered by it. And I think one of the funny things that people alluded to when I was kind of researching this was that when she invites Willow over to her house because they find one of Angel's notes in Willow's room to make sure she's safe, they specifically allude to the fact that her parents are there. And they're just like, well, could Angel not have killed her parents? And just, but like, let's not worry about that.
It's a shame that this episode has so much to talk about, because I'd like to talk about Willow's like confirmation here of being Jewish and a little bit of discussion around her Jewish identity. But we'll do that another time, because this episode is huge. And also, I don't know a lot about Jewish identities. The thing I know most about it is from Ulysses. So
and just before we move on, because I think there's one other big thread we need to talk about here, but when all this happens, Cordelia just does a good supporting role. She can have a lot of great scenes, but her main concern is that Angel had been in her car, so he needs to be disinvited from the car. And there's just like a running plot in the background, which is like, I was so worried that I had to convince my grandmother to switch cars with me so she could be killed. And then when she turns up later on, her car is just flooded with garlic, like garlic hanging from every door. It's incredible. But I think the other side of this episode that we need to really dig into, because they've actually talked a lot about Buffy specifically, and specifically Buffy, Angel, and Joyce, and that whole interaction is really key to this.
It's fascinating. So Angel comes along and starts talking to Joyce after Buffy has warned Joyce about Angel
and framed him as basically an
abusive ex,
an unstable college student who's following her around and all this kind of stuff.
So he turns up and he basically tells her that they slept together, and Buffy and Willow manage to keep him out by doing their spell. So actually, that's probably the first time that Willow has done magic to some degree. But I suppose it's an incantation, and as opposed to a...
It's not like a full...
There's no energy. I don't think there's any energy conducted through her in that moment.
Yeah, I think like the ritual at the end of the season is where she's like, Goddess Willow. It's actually, first touch of like...
Okay, we're not going to talk about this because we don't have enough time, but... did you find it oddly specific that apparently Angel's soul gets trapped in the ether when it's not, when that's where it gets called down from into the orb of Tessila?
Yeah, so it like the soul logic is very inconsistent in this, because like, does Liam have a distinct fingerprinted soul that is somewhere? And sometimes they suggest that souls are just like generic things that can fill someone up, and I
think Liam's soul is Angel's soul. I think they're the same.
Well, that's what I mean. But like, are they unique to a person, or can like? There's other parts of the Buffy like magical canon that suggest you could take the soul out of Angel and put it into Spike, and he would be in soul, and a soul is a unit of soul.
Is that extended universe Buffy?
Not only there's some of the stuff in Angel the show, which is really vague about what part is Angelus and which is Angel, which is Liam, etc. I actually do think it's quite inconsistent. But the idea that the soul is out there somewhere to be gathered back in is very odd and very specific.
So they then have to have the talk, Buffy and Joyce, and there's a really beautiful shot in it that you highlighted, which was that Buffy and Joyce.
I'm so surprised I highlighted.
I know, yeah. You're looking at a TV show. How did you do that? Yeah. But Buffy and Joyce are shot in the same frame at one point, so they're both basically sitting facing the same direction, and one of them is in profile, and one of them is in the at the right hand side of the scene, and one on the left hand side. And it's actually quite a nice shot just generally, but specifically for me, it highlights the fact that for the most part, Buffy and Joyce are shot very diametrically. They're in
opposition to each other.
They are, yeah. They tend to be shot, over kitchen counter. Like, one will be talking in one shot, and the other one will be talking in another shot. They very rarely share a scene together. So that was an interesting close-up shot. But yeah, it's actually it's a great acting job from both of them. There's a really upsetting line where Joyce does say, "I just thought you would show more judgment," and Buffy just, in some ways, just doesn't need to hear that at that moment, because Buffy's been punished for that reasoned decision so extensively already, and she's barely keeping it together at that point. But then at the same time, Joyce says, and in the moment that, you know, is so necessary, he says, "Don't expect me to ever stop caring about you, because that's never going to happen. I love you more than anything else in this world."
Yeah, what changes it from being just like Charlie Brown's mother and her just being a set of legs giving out to Buffy to it actually being a really nuanced relationship. And Joyce talks about how this was her first time giving the talk as well, and her main concern is very much about protecting Buffy and how sometimes you have to get angry at people when they're putting themselves in danger. Like Joyce loves Buffy so much. Like,
yeah.
It's so clear, and I think in a physical sense she's not empowered, but I think we've said this before, like when Joyce is confronting Angel, we know she's in danger, but like you do feel strength coming from her as well, just very much like, stay away from my daughter, you know.
Yeah.
And as you said, the great scene when Angel gets surprised with the fact he can't enter the house and kill her, Buffy says to him, "Sorry, Angel, we've changed the locks," and slams the door in his face. And
then she explains afterwards that, oh yeah, he wasn't able to come in because he's actually really superstitious, so that's why we're chanting in Latin, and there's garlic everywhere.
yeah. So let's just paper over that. Let's keep going. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it was awful. But no, it was a great scene, and you know, a couple of some of the online people, and these are probably the same people who like Xander, so i.e. bad people, but they tend to really dislike Joyce.
Really?
Yeah, they think she's a bad mother.
Oh, I don't agree with that at all.
I don't either.
I don't agree with that at all.
I really like Joyce. I think she's doing the best that she can.
I think she's one of the strongest parental characters on television.
Yeah, she's up there with... I mean, I always think that the best mother on television has to be Lorelai Gilmore. Because she makes mistakes and she's annoying, but she's doing her best at all points.
Yeah.
And like
Joyce knows nothing.
Yeah.
Like from her perspective, she's actually quite even-handed, I think. You know, she's just like Buffy's behavior is the behavior of a truant child. Like that's from an external perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one last point that we want to hit before we move on to the dusting is Xander is a cunt. So okay, this is a specific segment in our podcast. So Xander, he's a cunt. Why won't he stop doing all those things? We hate him.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, so he's being an asshole in this episode. First of all, he kind of slut shames Buffy and Cordelia at the beginning of the episode. He's like, yeah, stop inviting strange men into your room.
Okay, so he says that, like, you girls should stop inviting strange men into your room. He also makes, when they hear that they have to stay in the same room so they won't be murdered by a man, says, oh, did you have a camera in there so I could see you have a sleepover?
Horrifying. And then most importantly, at the end of the episode, when Giles goes to kill Angel, he's like, well, you know, I didn't want to say I told you so, but I told you so because I've been saying we should have killed Angel the whole time.
I've literally only been correct in that opinion in the last 2 weeks. For very obvious reasons.
And everyone else agrees with you at those points. Like, he had absolutely no reason to hold this animosity towards Angel. And Angel saved his life a couple of times by this point. And just Xander is a douche.
I don't want this just be a knee-jerk reaction with Xander, but I don't understand why he has to be the way he is sometimes. Is it just a foil thing that someone needs to be? But yeah, it's
no, it's character development. Like, that's just his bad character.
He does that male thing that happens sometimes, where sometimes he doesn't know how to support people, so he just kind of shouts at them a bit.
Yeah, true.
But it's not. He does grow and he does develop, but it's taking a while.
It sure is. Anyway, I don't know. After coming off like a reasonably good episode last week, Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered for Xander, this is like it's such a drop. Yeah,
but I suppose the Angel Xander thing is like such a rivalry.
Yeah.
That it's going to come up here, but I think very much what this episode does do is, Buffy almost like can't summon the motivation to deal with Angel just for herself, and it's the fact that it's now her people around her that she will always like regain focus for that.
Yeah,
I think like Angel portrays himself as such like not omnipotent, but just an experienced and sure character, and he underestimates Buffy, and that is what happens. And he thinks that, like other people, if he can just break her down emotionally and hurt the people around her, then that's going to cause her to crumble. And he is just 100% wrong. It just causes her to focus like a sharp as a razor. Yeah, it starts to come together in this episode very much so.
Absolutely,
yeah.
This is the beginning of the denouement of the season. Okay, so let's move into the dusting. Some Buffy bits.
It's actually such a densely packed episode. I haven't even looked at my notes yet. So
okay, so my first Buffy bit is that apparently Ed Sheeran sampled the Remembering Jenny theme.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't mention that. I don't want to get his name on our
in
podcast.
A Fire Love. Which is one of his songs, presumably. I don't know. Ed Sheeran's not good at the old music thing, so I don't care. But that's actually the the Remembering Jenny theme is the part playing over her funeral, in which, for some fucking reason, they list her name as Jennifer Callender. And just like, that's not her name.
That's not her name, yeah.
But that's actually Anthony Stewart Head singing in that scene. He's
harmonizing.
Exactly, yeah. This is Anthony Head's favorite episode.
Fair.
Yeah. I think it's, and he said it was specifically like beautifully shot and stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure is. There is a reflection in when Giles attacks Angel. That plot thing happens in season 5 again. Mm-hmm. When Willow attacks Glory after Glory has brain drained Tara, and it goes badly for them for both of them, and Buffy has to save them basically.
You know what this show has a lot of words you get used to saying which don't mean anything in any other context, like it's brain drain, ensouled, sire, just dusting, obviously, just things where it's like we just accepted these as things. Yeah.
The music playing at the beginning of the episode in the Bronze is Morchiva, who are a reasonably good trip hop band actually. They have an album they listened to back in the day that I can't remember the name of, but I think the song that was playing in this episode was from it, and yeah, it was a pretty good album if I remember it. It was kind of trip hoppy.
Pretty certain we established in the second episode of Buffy Boys that we don't talk about the music in the Bronze because it's not interesting.
For the most part, yeah.
So yeah, let's see what I have. Just in terms of some fashion notes.
No, we're not doing fashion yet. We're doing Buffy bits.
Okay, I kind of see fashion as kind of like part of the Buffy bits, but anyway, I'll keep my lines separate. So she goes to a magic shop, Jenny does, to get the Orb of Tesla. It's a different magic shop from the one we see later, potentially because that guy might be dead. I think he might be dead. Actually, I would be interested to see if he's considered dead by the wiki. But there's this whole bit where he does like a fake kind of like gypsy magic man routine, and then figures out that she knows the trade, so he's just an American kind of selling stuff, which is quite funny. But he implies that her uncle Angelus lived in Sunnydale and he was a regular customer there,
which is weird.
Unless he mail ordered stuff. I think it's interesting that Buffy doesn't forgive Jenny by the time she dies. That would be an easy thing to kind of have that tied up, and it has a danger to make Buffy slightly unsympathetic, but she doesn't because people don't. That's what happens. I thought it was interesting that Angel, when he talks to Joy specifically, plays the college boy. He's not playing Angelus. He is pretending to be some lovesick and slightly mentally unstable 24-year-old or something, which is really, cruel.
It sure is.
I also think that if Jenny had actually laid all this out for Giles, it was a bit full on.
Yeah.
To come back to your apartment after you've just maybe kind of reconciled with someone you were dating, and they told you that they loved you, and then you come in and they've gotten inside your apartment and filled with roses. Like, I can see the romance of it, but also like a bit full on, I thought.
Sure. There's actually something that I would have liked to have looked at in this episode if we had a bit more time, is when Angel kills Jenny, he says something like, "Now it's time to get off," or something like that. But there's something very sexual about the way he kills her. It's a real, like, it feels like a release for him, and a real, like, and he says, like,
this is where you get off.
This is where you get off, and then he says, "I never get tired of that." After he kills her,
yeah,
and there is a sexually charged nature to it, so it's definitely connected with the sex and death stuff.
The magic shop is apparently called the Dragon's Cove.
Oh, there you go.
And yeah, I suppose just in terms of death count, we talk about that.
Yeah, go for it.
So the girl drained by Angelus outside the Bronze, the owner of that beautiful little puppy, is implied by Drusilla to have been killed off screen. Sunshine, yeah. It does list the magic shop owner as having been killed by Drusilla. I don't know if we saw that or she meant.
Well, I mean, like, she gets the information, so I mean.
Yeah, well, because it's just interesting because Wikipedia mentions it as definitive, where it mentions the dog owner is only mentioning, so it would imply that happened on screen anyway. And there was someone else. Who else died in this episode? Oh yeah, Jenny Calendar died in this episode as well. For next.
Important to note, another one for the Giles getting knocked out.
Yes.
Count.
Yes, Giles needs to get an MRI.
He sure does.
He wakes up and he's a beautiful singer.
Some fashion notes. Xander is wearing a literal picnic basket picnic blanket at one point. It's like a red, like, tartan shirt that's 8 sizes too large. And at another point, he's wearing tartan pants.
Shit you not. Which is never a good look.
No.
And Willow's wearing a backpack, which is just a big yellow smiley face.
Emoji backpacks before they were popular.
Yeah, and it's like very circular, and it's like you couldn't really fit a lot of books.
Well, that obviously distracted you from the fact that she was at the same time wearing the ugliest yellow and blue jumper I've ever seen with a huge butterfly in the front. So, Jenny Calendar is actually wearing very beautiful clothes throughout, like lots of sheer tops, and she looks very chic and youthful and lovely.
Techno-pagan. Chic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I suppose it's kind of it for me for the Buffy books.
Sure, great, okay. Yeah, let's do ratings. Okay. Will I go first? Will you go first?
You go first this time.
Great. Okay, cool. I'm going to give this episode 10 out of 10 sunshines. It's another one. I think we're getting a bit liberal with the 10 out of 10s, but like
it's the season
passion
that's in it.
in season 2 of Buffy. Like, there's not a bad note in it. It's immaculately written, beautifully shot, incredibly acted, and it is it's seared in my brain forever. So I don't know what more to say about that.
Okay, so I'm going to say 10 out of 10 poorly maintained record players.
Oh.
Because Giles never took the needle off his record.
Yeah.
Actually, before I comment on that, just one other thing I wanted to mention is that it's implied that Angel went back to his apartment to leave a drawing of Jenny while he was at the police station. I never noticed that before, but it's the only way that makes sense because he finds that when he goes back the second time. Cruel. But yeah, so 10 out of 10. Yeah, I don't know what's missing from this episode. There's some funny moments. There's genuine panic. I genuinely did feel my heart genuinely.
Your heart was literally beating.
My heart was literally beating during the chase scene. It's shocking. It sets the tone for the show. It's an incredibly important strut in the narrative of the entire universe going forward. And it's just some good television. It's just good television.
Excellent television.
And I got weepy. And I think you probably did a little bit as well.
Yeah, that's true. We watched The Lion King last night and I fucking cried my eyes out. And then we watched Mrs. Doubtfire and I cried my fucking eyes out. It was the worst night of my life.
That's actually my recommendation. If you guys haven't watched Mrs. Doubtfire recently, watch it again. It's a much better film than you remember.
Yeah.
It's not just a jokey Robin Williams thing. It's actually quite a difficult examination of a man who's separated from his children.
Robin Williams is just he's maybe the most talented performer of the last 50 years, and he's the most tragic figure of all time. I mean, the fact that a man with that much multiplicity within him and that much talent and life and vigor. Oh gosh. The next episode is Killed by Death, which is the episode where
that sounds like a title of one of our episodes rather than a Buffy episode.
True, it's the episode where Buffy's in the hospital, if I remember correctly.
Very cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's just a bit of a meta episode, I reckon.
But I think there'll be some good like Grimm's Brothers shit in there.
Yeah, hopefully. We're hurtling forward towards the season 2 finale, and I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Okay, great. Well, thanks for listening all the way through to our review of Passion, which is a very important Buffy episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell your friends, tell your computer science teachers. And we hope
even if they're students.
Oh god, the whole thing. Willow's going to be the teacher for a while, so we'll get into that whole administrative mess at a later date. But thanks very much for listening, and we will see you next week on Buffy. Buffy Boys.
Yeah, cool.
See ya.
Slán.